Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stew with JT Brew. I'm your host, Justin Taylor. Tonight, we are going to talk about Dynasty rookies, who we're targeting, our sleepers, our favorite players, the guys we think might bust. So stick with us. You're here on the Fantasy and Frame family of shows. You're in the stew now.
You up on trades and why you move, you ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release, we started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute, make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sifting through through new statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes, down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to the Stew with JT Brew.
I want to introduce my guest, Ryan Heath from Fantasy Points tonight. Ryan, thanks for joining me and coming on here to talk a little NFL rookies.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Rookies are always fun. Excited to dive into it.
Yeah, I know a bunch of people have done some rookie drafts already, and I've done quite a few of them. Still a bunch more to go. Kind of want to talk about where some of these guys are going, where we like them, if we don't like them, where they're headed. So let's kind of jump right into it. Let's talk about some of your favorite targets. Some of the guys you're looking at the top rounds. Obviously, anybody up at the top wants Caleb Williams, wants Marvin Harrison Jr. Everybody wants those guys at the top of the draft. But where are some of the guys you're kind of focusing on that you kind of like? If you don't have one of those very top picks, where are some of the guys maybe in that mid to late first round that you're kind of targeting?
Yeah, in the late first, I'll even find myself trading up into the late first or early second for this very frequently. I'm drafting a lot of Jonathan Brooks. Look, I understand kind of as an industry, we have sworn off rookie running backs and we've been hurt a lot recently. And yes, I understand with wide receiver, the longevity, there being multiple ones on the field is usually nice as opposed to being in a forced backfield by committee. But that only makes running backs who can be those every down bell cows that much more valuable because they are so much more rare. And I do think that Jonathan Brooks has that profile. If you tell me I can add that for a late first, I am always going to do it. So just to support with a few stats, in Brooks's college career, he ranked in the 91st percentile among all running backs in terms of missed tackles forced per touch. That's one of the stickiest stats we have going from college to the pros. So that is an incredible sign. Brooks just kind of can do it all. He has the receiving ability. He can get it done on the ground. And we could see something similar to what we saw with Rachaad White under Dave Canales last year. So just kind of for all these reasons, Brooks really sticks out to me at the end of the first round. I want him over all of that like second tier of wide receivers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like Brooks a lot. I'm a big Trey Benson guy. I've kind of been, banging the drum for him for about a year and a half now as my RB1. I'm loving if he gets to me in the second round. And that late first round, if Brooks is there, I love grabbing him. But if I don't have a pick there, I'm loving, Trey Benson as maybe the RB2 at the top of that second round. There's another guy that, you and me are kind of on opposite sides of here. So tell me about your next guy that you're kind of targeting there at the late end of the first round.
Yeah, so I am taking my medicine as a responsible Dynasty Superflex manager, and I am drafting Bo Nix in the late first of Superflex drafts. Look, quarterback in the Superflex leagues, the most valuable position, a quarterback that is very likely to start a lot of games in year one with top 12 draft capital. That should just automatically be worth a first rounder in Superflex. As my good friend Thomas Tipple likes to say, only God can scout the quarterback position. We should have a lot of uncertainty baked into any of our evaluations of these quarterbacks. Is Bo Nix my favorite prospect? No. But look, he's going into a pretty decent situation. Sean Payton has a long history of getting at least passable production out of completely mediocre talents at the quarterback position. So I think there's just a lot of ways that drafting Knicks with a late first can work out for you. Even if it is, I am just flipping him next year for an earlier first, or in order to trade up to a more elite QB to facilitate a deal like that. Knicks's value proposition from a dynasty perspective is just really, really good. And we know that quarterbacks very often have good value insulation if they were drafted in the first round the following season. I mean, Bryce Young had about as disastrous of a season as a rookie quarterback could have. He is still worth about a Will Levis or a Deshaun Watson type of price. So that I am happy to take shots on guys like that.
Yeah, so I've got Bo Nix on my bus list, but I do like where your head's at, taking him at the end of the first. It's something I really missed out on last year. I was anti Will Levis, so I didn't take him anywhere, and I missed out on some value where I could have taken him and then later traded him and flipped him. So I'm in the position now. Since I'm out on Bo Nix, I actually don't mind taking him and then looking to move him. Like you said, the value is there. I liked Knicks in college. I saw him at the combine. I didn't love what I saw at the combine, and I'm just a little nervous about that Broncos situation. That team scares me this year. So if I can take him in that late first, like you said, if I have to get a QB and I need starters, yes, if I can take him and then possibly flip him, I like where your head's at there, because for me, he's on my bus list. So I don't usually want to take those guys, but I think you made a good point. The value is there. So even if you don't want him, he's a guy we're targeting and then turning around and figuring out what you can get for him on the trade market. Who's next on your list on guys you're kind of looking here at the top of the drafts?
Yeah, so I'm really big on Marshawn Lloyd. I have him ranked as a mid-second rounder, kind of just right at the bottom of that tier where everyone stops having a consensus. I would put Lloyd like right into my top 18 there. And the reason for that is I really like this spot and I like this fit. I think Josh Jacobs' days as an NFL bell cow are likely over. I've written an ungodly amount of words about that and why all of his incredible inefficiency from last year and him changing teams bodes very poorly for his workload in this upcoming season. The Packers also absolutely love using committees. LaFleur was in a press conference a few days ago saying basically that. And Lloyd is just really fun when you watch him. Like I'm much more of a data type of person when I'm prospecting, but just watching the Marshawn Lloyd highlights, it is like it feels dangerous in a way because all I see is DeAndre Swift, and I'm someone that very much like fell for DeAndre Swift and have been hurt by DeAndre Swift a lot in his career. But it just kind of reminds me of that at a much lower price point in a system I think could be very conducive to Lloyd increasing his value in year one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I love Lloyd in that middle of the second round. If you can get him, I actually have him as my RB4 in this draft class, right behind Blake Corum. But I'm finding myself, even though I have Corum ranked a little higher, I'm finding myself wanting to trade back or like look where I can get Lloyd at a good price as opposed to grabbing Corum. I don't have any Corum and I have quite a few shares of Lloyd so far. So Lloyd's a guy I like. I've seen in quite a few of my drafts right in that second round. It's kind of a mix between Lloyd, Corum, and Jalen Wright. Who's going where? I've seen them go in every different order. In that round, I've seen those guys go top of the second all the way to the dropping to the early third. So it's just kind of depends on who you like, but I'm with you there. I think there's a chance that he gets some playing time in Green Bay, and I'm not totally sold that Josh Jacobs is gonna be the guy for a really long time. I think if Lloyd looks decent at all, I could see them moving on from Jacobs pretty quickly. So I'm with you. I'm getting all the Lloyd I can get in the second round. I've had 2 or 3 drafts where I'm a little bit on the later backside of the second round, and he got picked the pick right before me, and I was pretty ticked off both times because I thought he was going to get to me. I was like, oh, he's going to get there. And a few times I was like, I wish I would have realized that. I probably would have pulled the trigger on a trade, try to move up a spot or two if that would have been able to get him for me. Go on the other side of that. I've got a guy on my bus list that, since we're talking about him, tell me what you think. I just cannot find myself in a position where I'm taking Jalen Wright. It feels like Miami's the perfect spot for him in that he is kind of that speed back that's like a Raheem Mostert. It's like a Devin A-Chain. He's that. It seems like he landed in the perfect spot, but I'm just having a hard time taking a guy in the early to mid-second round that could potentially be the RB3 for the whole season unless guys get hurt. Kind of what are your feelings on Jalen Wright?
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I am not huge on Wright. He is my RB5. I'm not really getting him at all in drafts. Yeah, always prioritizing Lloyd over him. Kind of the reason for that is just number one, day 3 running backs, very unlikely to hit for fantasy football. So that I do count that against him, even though the actual draft pick difference between someone like Lloyd or Corum and Wright isn't that massive. I do still think that matters. And in addition to that, Wright did put up a lot of production, a lot of efficiency on the ground in college, but he faced light fronts at the highest rate of any Power 5, or at least of any relevant Power 5 running back. On over 80% of his carries, he was facing light fronts. So I just think a lot of his production is kind of fraudulent. Yes, he is in the absolute perfect system for him. Like he puts up production in Mickey Mouse run games. Well, we have the Shanahan style running game that I'm sure he's going to love a lot. But yeah, he needs to climb the depth chart. He is probably entering the season as a handcuff for either Achane or Mostert. Sure, that can lead to snaps, but I am very skeptical that his value increases in kind, right? Because I just thinking about what the dynasty community normally does with especially these day 3 types of backs that are in crowded backfields. Even if Wright comes out and has a handful of productive games, I don't think you can all of a sudden turn around and sell him for an early second or anything like that. That it just seems like a very narrow a very narrow path to actual fantasy value, fantasy upside. And I don't think that Marshawn Lloyd or a Blake Corum have those issues. I think their paths are very clear, and they would be taken pretty seriously as bell cows immediately if their starter went down or if they just outright won the job.
Yeah, I feel the same way with Wright. I just don't see where there's a situation, unless both guys are hurt in front of him, that I could see myself comfortably starting him in my lineup. You know, he just seems like that guy that's going to get you some big plays here and there. He's going to have maybe 1 or 2 huge weeks where he busts off a 70-yarder and he ends up scoring you a ton of points. But then other weeks are he's getting almost no carries or doesn't have any room. So he's a guy I'm just nervous about. I can see where people like him because of the speed. Him on Miami, I felt, is the only reason I really liked him. I was way down on him before that pick, but it felt like that was a perfect landing spot. But he's just a guy in the early to mid second, like you said. I'd much rather have Lloyd. So for me, if I'm early second, I'm either trading back or I'm taking a wide receiver or like Benson at the top of the second and then trading back into the end of the second and getting Lloyd if he kind of falls. So that's kind of how I feel the same there with you on that one. Tell me about one of your top wide receiver targets. Jermaine Burton, he's a guy that has, was kind of farther down on draft lists heading into the draft, then goes to Cincinnati. Everybody's like, really, not sure about the T. Higgins situation. Is that pushed him up your draft board?
So it's a few things. So number one, I think Burton can be like a starting level deep threat type of player in the league, just from his profile, from his production in college. I think he meets like a baseline level of, can this guy start in the league? great. If I can draft that in the third round of the rookie draft, probably going to be decently happy with that. But as far as his situation and the T Higgins of it all, it's not even so much that I expect T Higgins to get traded, but I expect this Bengals offense to run in 3 receiver sets the majority of the time. They were, I believe, top 3 in percentage of plays with 3 or more receivers on the field last year. Obviously, Tyler Boyd is now gone. There are all these whispers of Jamar Chase potentially playing even more in the slot. He's been very effective there throughout his career. I think like top 3 in yards per out run in the league since he entered it out of the slot. So I had easier matchups, but also my brain just thinks, okay, if this is the thought in Cincinnati, then that suggests that they're trying to think of ways to get Burton on the field as that outside receiver. So that just gets me interested and intrigued. Obviously, this is an offense we expect to be pretty good. It doesn't hurt to be attached to Joe Burrow. So that's kind of the logic, is just I think he's walking into one of the better situations that you're going to get for a wide receiver that is starting in the late second or into the third round. So that's kind of where I start and how I end up on him.
Yeah, I like it. I think the Bengals are going to be in a lot of shootouts this year. I really do. I'm a little down on their defense overall. I just think they really struggled against the pass last year. I just think they're going to end up being in a lot of games where they're going to have to win, and they're going to have to put up a lot of points. And if I'm going to take a guy that ends up being wide receiver on a team, I want it to be a team like the Bengals, a team that I'm expecting to have to put up a lot of points, and a team that's going to move the ball around a lot. I mean, Tyler Boyd hasn't been great the last couple of years, but he's been solid as a flex play in fantasy. I think Burton has got higher upside in that spot, like you said. So I have no problem playing as wide receiver 3. And then again, if T Higgins somehow moves along and they really like what they see out of Burton, I mean, I think that just his value goes way up from there. So he's a guy I like you said. I've seen mostly at the beginning of the third. He was kind of like middle of the end of the third. I think people are really getting on him. I've seen a lot of people frustrated he doesn't get later in the third now. I think you got to go up and get him late second or early third. So that's one I like as well. A couple of my targets that I kind of really like in this mix, these first couple rounds. I'm a guy. I've seen people kind of down on Brian Thomas Jr. here lately. He was the guy that was going fairly early in the first. Now is really seeming in a lot of drafts to go late first, early second. I've even got him as late as a 2-4 in 1 or 2 drafts. I know he's got some boom or bust potential, but I just really think he ends up being one of the top guys, if not the top guy, by next year for the Jags. So I'm buying Brian Thomas everywhere I can get him. What do you think about Brian Thomas?
For Thomas, I don't hate the Brian Thomas profile, but when I compare it, especially to all of these other round 1 wide receivers, I'm a little bit underwhelmed, especially in fantasy. I think an arbitrage Brian Thomas, essentially, where if I want kind of this archetype of very likely to be mostly outside, high average depth of target, a few shots downfield per game type of player, I'd rather be drafting that in the second or the third round than in the late first round of rookie drafts. And I'm absolutely taking Jonathan Brooks over Brian Thomas. I have Ladd McConkey over him as well. And the reason for that, while yes, just in terms of overall counting stats, Brian Thomas outplayed McConkey in college. When you look at the per route stuff, which is the important thing with Ladd McConkey, just because of how much they rotate their receivers, how often McConkey just wouldn't play the fourth quarter, lots of weird stuff like that. But when you jump into the per route numbers, a guy like Ladd McConkey or even freshman year Xavier Worthy just really outproduced Brian Thomas and were much more efficient on a per route basis. So that's kind of why I prefer both of those guys. And it's just easier for me to envision a Ladd McConkey like running a PPR scam and being an every week type of fantasy starter than it is for me to envision that with Brian Thomas, where I do think Christian Kirk is legitimate target competition. One of the most underrated receivers in the league right now is Christian Kirk. So it's hard for me to imagine Thomas stepping in and taking command of this wide receiver room to the point where I just think a year from now, we're going to be talking about Thomas kind of like how we talk about George Pickens, where he has like his hive of people who will always defend him and have like a very strong take on his talent, but it won't necessarily translate to fantasy just because of the archetype of player he is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm right in that McConkey, Brian Thomas. I've been switching back and forth at the end of that first round, beginning of the second round. I've probably taken each of them about 50% of the time. I definitely think McConkey has the safer floor this year. I think he could be the wide receiver one for the Chargers. So I definitely, if I'm on a team that's competing that needs stats this season, I'm probably taking McConkey. If I'm looking for a little more in the future and I'm going boom or bust, I want to take the ultimate huge upside. That's where I'm kind of leaning Brian Thomas, because I do think the profile, everything looks great, but you're right. It could be, he could be scary where he's one of those guys that, he has some of those George Pickens games where he has a monster game or he gives you nothing. And so I agree with you on those ones. Let's talk about another guy that's a little bit divisive in the fantasy community. A guy that was kind of, people are looking at him as a late first rounder, then they didn't like the landing spot, and then the late breakout, and that's Xavier Legette for the Carolina Panthers. So he's a guy that early on people kind of were talking about maybe that 112, 2-1, 2-2, and then I've seen him drop all the way to the late second. Now I've actually got him as late as 211 in a few leagues. He seems like a guy that people are like, either they like him or they don't. Where are you on a Legette? I love it at the 2.8. At 112, I was out on him. But if I'm taking him, a guy that was a first round pick in the NFL draft, and I know people think Jonathan Mingo, and that's why they're out on him. But I just think I loved him at South Carolina. I know he was a 1-year wonder there, but I'm willing to take a chance on a guy that was a first round pick in the late second round. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I rank Legette kind of in that back end of the second round. But I guess sort of my issue is just somebody is always willing to take him before I am. I understand that having that first round draft capital is nice. It's about as late as you're going to get access to that in a rookie draft. But yeah, I just don't like the profile at all. I understand that his final fifth year season was incredibly elite, just sort of in every way. So yeah, that's great. But we care about age adjusted production when it comes to prospecting rookies through data. And Legette did almost nothing his entire college career up until that final season. And that is just a really huge red flag to me. And I mean, kind of moving into the landing spot and how the team seems to be thinking of him, I don't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Canales or the GM or a random wide receivers coach or something, but there was right around the draft or right after, there was this quote going around about how the Panthers can't wait to use him like on screens and on trick plays, and they want to design a bunch of targets for him and get the ball in his hands. And I was just getting Laviska Shenault types of vibes from that, because when you say, oh, we want to scheme touches around the line of scrimmage, we really want to use this guy on screens. What's that saying to me is, oh, you don't think that he can win against NFL DBs on the outside or in the slot. You're just looking, so you have to find ways to manufacture the touches. And it's very rare that those types of players actually develop into wide receivers that can command an immense target share, which is what we want in fantasy football. So I am generally out on Legette. If he's there and kind of falls to me like in the late second, I'm not super against pulling the trigger. At some point, I will just say, okay, fine, give me the first round draft capital. But I would say, is one of the profiles I like the least between that and his cost.
Another guy you had on your bus list was another guy that we've heard everybody talking about manufacturing touches, ways to give him the ball. How does he win at the next level? And that's Malachi Corley for the New York Jets.
Yeah, you can basically just copy and paste the exact same take I just gave. I have pretty much all of those concerns about Corley as I do for Leggett. But with Corley, it was even more so that was kind of what his production profile looked like in college. So it's just even double that concern. So yeah, I haven't taken Corley at all. There are a lot of other guys I prefer, like in the third round.
Yeah, so that's been me. I liked Corley in college, but the more I watched him, the more I got into the film. I'm like, man, he's gonna have to be on a team that is forcing him the ball like they did at Western Kentucky in order to get him touches. And I just am not willing to pay a second round pick for him. Now, I've seen, because the hate is kind of starting to catch up with him, I've seen him get into the third round in a lot of drafts. If he fell late third, I would probably consider taking him depending on who was there. But I just find myself not taking him anywhere. It just seems like there's too many other wideouts I like in that same range, and I'm just not willing to pull the trigger on him. He, like you said, it just feels like he's going to have to be one of those screen guys. And is he ever going to get enough target share? When that's the only way they're getting him the ball, that makes me real nervous. So he's a guy that I'm kind of out on too as well. You had one other guy on your kind of bust list, a guy that a lot of people are liking. Tell me why you're out on Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, so I should say I have Worthy ranked like right at the end of the first round. I would not be opposed to draft the guy on the Chiefs with the first round draft capital if the draft falls that way. I find in practice Worthy is sometimes jumping up to like 7th or 8th overall. I have absolutely no interest in taking a profile like his there. And kind of the reason for that is I'm just confused how the Chiefs are going to use him. So last year, Rashee Rice came in and he sort of stole like the Kadarius Toney role in training camp, which is kind of all this low average depth of target, Mickey Mouse type of targets, except on the Chiefs with the Andy Reid play design, that's an actually valuable fantasy role, right? So maybe if Malachi Corley was on the Chiefs, I would feel differently. Maybe I'd be more interested in that skill set match. But Rice last year on the Chiefs kind of took over that role. And towards the end of the season, when he was running more of a full-time route share, he was effective on the outside as well. He was like top 20 in all the per route stuff, getting close to top 12 in just total receiving yards per game at the end of the year. Rashee Rice kind of came in and showed that role in terms of near the line of scrimmage and plus, I guess, with the real types of routes is his, right? They signed Marquise Brown. I think Marquise Brown has this reputation as like, oh, he's a deep ball wide receiver. He can be used in the intermediate game as well. So I like that skill set fit along with Rashee Rice. But then Worthy comes in and the first instinct is to say, oh, okay, they should use him on like all of the like little gadgety stuff that Rice got last year. I don't know that is immediately going to be the case. Maybe depending on the suspension, maybe that's the case early in the year. But Worthy's ball tracking when he is running deep, it is not good. He is not a good wide receiver deep down the field. And that's not just my take. That is from Brett Whitefield over at Fantasy Points, whose film opinions on wide receivers I probably trust the most out of almost anybody in this industry, has an unbelievable track record. But yeah, his biggest concern with Worthy is he just has really poor ball tracking, and that's going to limit his ability to operate as a deep threat, which seems like, assuming Rice is on the field, that seems like the most likely role the Chiefs would want to put Worthy in. And I just don't know that he's going to succeed there. And then, you look at the production profile in college, it's just concerning, especially when you're looking at the per route stuff. When he was at Texas, the production just kind of wasn't there on a route to route basis. at least after his freshman season. So yeah, it's fine. Like, we did this with Rashee Rice last year, and it turns out sometimes it is a good idea to click on the profile that has holes in it if he is matched up with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. This is kind of the take I have for Keon Coleman this year, where early second, fine, I'll click the guy playing with Josh Allen, even if I don't like his profile. If that's where Worthy was going, I'd feel the exact same way, and I'd be happy to draft him. But just the cost right now in the industry is not at all in line with where I'd like to take him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm the same way. I'm not totally against Worthy, but where you're having to buy him, I'm out on him. I just am not going to take him that high. A guy that's on my bust list, I just cannot find myself in any spot where I like him and then I'm taking him, is Des Walker for the Baltimore Ravens. He's another guy tracking the ball deep. He looked not good at all at the Senior Bowl. I know he only played half a season this last year at North Carolina. I don't love the landing spot with the Ravens. That one's got me a little concerned. What do you think about him? I just cannot talk myself. I mean, he's got to drop some more before I take a shot on him in a league. And he hasn't far enough, for me to take him yet. In about 10 or 12 drafts I've been in, I don't have him on any teams. What are your thoughts kind of on Walker, as he's one of my biggest bust candidates?
I don't know why he has an ADP in the third round. I feel like I don't know anybody that is high on Walker. But yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of what you say, where I just doubt his ability to be a real receiver at the NFL level, winning outside against NFL DBs. I still has all of the archetype concerns of a Brian Thomas for me, and is on an offense that is very unlikely to produce any sort of starting level fantasy wide receiver production outside of a Mark Andrews and outside of a Zay Flowers. I think they really like Flowers there, for him to be in their manufactured touches role. So I don't see how Walker knocks him out of that. And I am just very I'm not very convinced of his ability to even get Rashad Bateman off the field.
Yeah, I mean, he would have to get to the very end of the fourth. I feel like before I take him, there's just sleepers I'd rather have and take a shot on other than him. Speaking of sleepers, let's talk about some of the guys you like. Some guys are maybe, are falling a little bit, or people just aren't sure where they want to take these guys. What's maybe some guys going somewhere in the third that you feel like is a nice sleeper? Somebody you're seeing yourself every time they get there. You're like, I definitely want to, kind of look at that guy in that round.
Yeah. So I guess my biggest one that I feel the strongest about and will have the most extensive take on is Javon Baker. So Baker's profile, if you ignore the fact that he didn't play in the Power 5 until his senior year, is actually pretty decent. I think he had a top 5 yards per route run season in his junior year out of any wide receiver in this class, up with the Harrisons and the Neighbors. So certainly at least against the smaller school competition, has the production profile to hang with a lot of the guys in this class. But really more so than anything to do with his profile, where I should say, I think Baker can play outside. I think he can play in the slot. I think that he has a lot of avenues in this Patriots receiver core to find his way to playing time. And the whole thing about this Patriots receiver core is it's incredibly ambiguous. Nobody is really taking any sort of strong stances. Right now, the most expensive one is Jalen Polk, and that is literally just because he has day 2 draft capital. And that is entirely what is supporting him as the most expensive option. Nobody has any sort of conviction on these guys. And there has just been a completely new regime created here with Drake May coming in, with the entirely new offensive coaching staff. Whenever we have a situation like that, where there's a new QB, new offensive coordinator on a team, but all of their surrounding weapons in fantasy are still priced down as if we know that they are still the worst offense in the league, then I get interested and I want to start buying up all of those pieces. So Baker is the cheapest way to do that in rookie drafts right now. I would be happy to take shots on even like a Demario Douglas right now for that exact reason. This is kind of how all of us missed Nico Collins and Tank Dell last year, because the Texans kind of had this stink about them where this isn't an offense that has any sort of upside, but we didn't know that at all because we knew nothing about the new quarterback and the new offensive coordinator in that position at all. And it's the same thing with the Patriots this year, where we have no idea how Drake May is going to perform. I think he's a top 3 quarterback in this class. I don't have like a particularly strong take on the Drake May talent, but this is the type of bet that can really pay off. If he's any good, at least one of these wide receivers is going to be a really, really big value in fantasy. So if I can get access to that in the 3rd round of a rookie draft, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I feel like I'd rather wait and take Baker than grab Polk earlier. You kind of feel the same way. It's just like, I like Polk okay, but I'm like, I'd rather get the value of Baker a little while later.
I mean, I'm drafting both of them. Yeah, I'm taking Polk a decent amount in the late second. The day 2 draft capital does matter. Day 3 wide receivers have very poor hit rates across the board. So I think it makes sense that we prefer Polk a little bit to a Baker. So yeah, I mean, I'll take shots with either one falling to me at their respective points in the rookie draft.
Both of us have a guy we like as a running back in the 3rd round. I'll let you start with your guy, and then I'll give you mine. You're a fan of Tyrone Tracy, the converted wide receiver from Purdue, that's now on the New York Giants. Tell me why you like Tracy.
I mean, it's kind of like liking Tyrone Tracy is kind of the most like fantasy bro take possible. I feel like where we see the converted wide receiver and we say, oh my God, that's the pass catching upside. Let's do it. I'm so in. And then you turn on the highlight reel and it's like, oh my God, he's just bouncing off of defenders in a way I have really never seen a college player do. So that's kind of really the whole take. And additionally, not a lot of competition in that backfield, really only Devin Singletary to deal with. Singletary, yes, while he has maintained a bell cow workload at times throughout his career, he's never done it for a full season. I don't think anybody is really expecting Devin Singletary to maintain a 70% snap share throughout the entire year. So Tracy is one guy who could potentially benefit from that. If you just believe in he's a really fast dude with a lot of athleticism, and sometimes that works out at the running back position. That's kind of all there is to it. I would make a comparison to like Isaiah Pacheco a couple of years ago. It was a similar bet in terms of is anybody going to take a stand on he's like a very technically proficient running back? No, maybe not, but really good athlete on a team with some potential opportunity. Maybe he gets a chance and he sticks. Tyrone Tracy is that, but with the theoretical pass catching upside that we so covet as fantasy managers.
Yeah, I was on Tracy in the 4th. Now that he's moved up to the 3rd, I'm pretty much not taking him anymore. It's not because I don't like Tracy, but I just like this guy better. And that's Ray Davis out of Kentucky, now on the Bills. I've been a Ray Davis guy from the very beginning. I just love the landing spot in Buffalo. I know he's got James Cook in front of him. I'm not a huge Cook guy. He puts the ball on the ground too much, but Ray Davis has really, great hands. He does not fumble. The crazy thing is everybody was kind of ripping Ray Davis about how old he is, and they're literally the same age. So him and Cook are exactly the same age. They're both 24. So I like Davis just in the fact that he's a different type of back than Cook. He's a little bit more of a bigger stout back that can kind of run those hard yards. Obviously, they run the ball with Josh Allen around the goal line a lot. I think there's a chance they maybe want to do that a little less to try to keep Allen healthy. And I just can see where Ray Davis ends up, even if he is the RB2 all year behind Cook. I think he's going to get enough touches with this team, and any kind of problems with Cook fumbling or any kind of injury, I think Ray Davis immediately becomes a top running back. And again, in Dynasty, I know he's older of a running back. I just want those 3 years out of him anyway. I want 3 good years out of him, and I'll be pumped, especially with a mid-third round pick. So he's kind of my guy that I'm targeting across the board in the third round. Do you have any thoughts on Ray Davis at all?
Yeah, I like Davis as well. I do have him ranked above Tracy, I should say. I'm not that insane. Yes, I agree that Davis has a very good chance to step into the Latavius Murray role in this offense pretty much immediately. And yeah, I mean, I largely agree with you. Just the fact that there is a quote unquote Latavius Murray role in this Bills offense should tell you all you need to know about kind of the deficiencies and I don't want to say deficiencies. I'll say limitations that James Cook has as a running back. But what I would say is this is all great. Yes, Ray Davis, I see the immediate path to playing time. I don't see the path to he's like a clear starter in the league that is like an every week I'm plugging him into my fantasy lineup type of guy. So I would say Ray Davis probably very underrated in like redraft best ball formats, but in Dynasty, I don't need to like trade up to get Ray Davis. If he falls to me in the third, that's fine, but I'm not like forcing the issue.
Yeah, we both like a different kind of sleeper wide receiver in the fourth round. You have a guy that I like a lot, and I've been eyeing a lot in the mid to late fourth round. I was getting him in the fifth round early, right after the draft, and he has moved up, and that's Malik Washington, Virginia wide receiver now at Miami. What do you think about Washington?
Yeah, so I just look at this Miami offense and I say, okay, it's been incredibly concentrated between Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle for multiple seasons now. I guess this is what it is, but that's not what it is. It's not that this is like Mike McDaniels or Tua Tagovailoa's philosophy that we are only going to throw the ball to two guys. It's just that is the talent disparity in that receiver core versus everybody else. The fact that people are talking up Jonnu Smith as a sleeper in the year 2024 for redraft should tell you all you need to know about the opportunity here after those two guys. So I like Washington a little bit. He has some interesting production. He does really well in like all the market share stats, which I don't care as much about in college. So like your dominator ratings and that type of thing. I don't care as much about that as I do the efficiency stuff when I'm projecting to the next level. But there are things to not hate in his statistical profile. He has some pretty clear opportunity. If he's any good, he's going to get on the field in this situation. So I don't know. I like it. I can just think of a lot of less exciting clicks you can make in the fourth round.
Yeah, I like your heads up because again, if Waddle or Tyreek Hill have any kind of injuries, I think that pushes Washington up. And like you said, I know people are like, oh, Jonnu Smith, tight end 1 for Miami, but they have shown that they basically are not using their tight ends. They're not throwing them. They want those guys to block. And so I think Washington could easily be the number 3 wide receiver for this team with some pretty high upside. So again, if we're talking sleepers in the fourth round, which, at this point, we all know the stats of like hitting on a fourth rounder in the rookie draft. I mean, we're just throwing darts anyway. So I like him a lot. He's one of the guys I'm definitely targeting in the fourth round. The other guy that's on my radar in the fourth round is Jacob Cowing for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, it seems like it's crazy because you're like, oh man, Ricky Purcell in the first round. You've already got Debo there. You've already got Ayuk there. How is this guy even going to get on the field? I don't think he's immediate impact unless there's some injuries, some other things happen. I just really like his profile. The guy was just productive everywhere he played in college. He just got targets and he made plays. And then I was really shocked with his 40 time at the combine. I thought he was a good athlete, but I did not see him running a sub 4.40. That to me pushed him up my list. I think if he had ended up in a different landing spot than the Niners, I think people would be talking about him a little more. I just think he's a guy that can eventually find himself a place in the NFL it could be productive. Again, it is a long shot. He is a smaller player. I just like his game and the fact that I think the Niners are going to figure out a way to use him at some point. He's probably a guy I'm stashing on my taxi squads, not expecting to play him at all. But he's like Washington. I'm willing to take a flyer on him and kind of sit on him and see if he hits. If he doesn't, it's a 4th round pick. That's what happens. But I'm looking at the guys with the highest upside, and to me, Cowing and Washington are the 2 wideouts in the 4th round with the highest upside. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to really take umbrage with like a taxi squad level stash, as you're saying. For me, I do focus a little bit more on can he make an immediate impact, because in practice, most of these taxi squad guys are a year from now. You're like, oh yeah, he's on my taxi squad. I guess I got to drop him to make room for the next
for my new rookies.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. So and that's just kind of the vibe I get with Cowing in this situation. So yeah, he's not someone I'm prioritizing, but I mean, if you like the player, if you have conviction on him outside of his situation, then I certainly get it.
Who are some of the other guys on your sleeper list that you're kind of looking either 3rd, 4th, 5th round that you were like, you know what, I'm going to take a shot on that guy because I think, it's worth it. Who else do you like?
Yeah, I guess I should just mention Spencer Rattler. It's a little surprise. I just first got to say up front, I'm not like a huge Spencer Rattler guy. This is not like an endorsement of I think Spencer Rattler is incredibly talented or anything like that. But kind of as I said up top with Bo Nix, Dynasty Superflex leagues, quarterbacks are incredibly valuable. Spencer Rattler's going in like the late 3rd-ish right now. That is probably the most high upside pick you can make in terms of if Spencer Rattler starts a handful of games as a rookie, whether through a car injury or through the Saints finally bottoming out and just throwing him out there and seeing what he can do, you can almost immediately sell Spencer Rattler for a 2nd-round pick. That is just how quarterbacks work in this game that we all play. I am surprised that his ADP isn't any higher than it is right now, kind of based on this situation. And I mean, like Dennis Allen is out in the media saying that he's like going to compete for the starting spot. So I don't know how much I believe that. Probably not at all. But yeah, it's at least interesting. And I just always feel like I have to remind people about like, hey, these are the QBs that have a path to playing time who could see a value spike. Even if you don't like them as a player, that's fine. You can draft them and flip them later. QBs are, especially like this tier of QB, is very easy to flip, especially during the season. There is always going to be a team that needs a starter at the quarterback position for a few weeks. So yeah, just a lot of opportunities with drafting and stashing Rattler, especially if you don't feel all that strongly about like a Malik Washington or any of these kind of later sleepers that we're discussing. If you just want to say, hey, I'm going to make a straight up value bet on like the mechanics of this game of Dynasty Superflex that we play, then I think taking Rattler there makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we actually had a pretty lengthy discussion on the Dynasty Theory Discord page the other day. We were all talking about like, is there a chance that Rattler starts? And something that got brought up was like, is it a situation like the Raiders last year where they were doing terrible? They're just like, hey, we're out on Jimmy G. Let's let Aiden O'Connell like see what he's got. I could see that where the Saints end up being the worst team in this division, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, how much longer are we going with Derek Carr? I mean, we're in the worst division of football. If he can't get us to the playoffs and win this division, do we give a guy like Rattler a shot? So I agree. I think there is some value there. And if I was a Carr owner, I'd be really nervous not to have him just in case he was a guy, if Carr's maybe my QB3, I'm not so worried. But if he's a guy I'm starting every week, I'm definitely probably keeping an eye out on where Rattler's going in drafts or whether I need to make a move and trade for him because I could see some scenarios where things go south pretty quickly in New Orleans. I'll mention just a couple guys on my list that I'm kind of like my deep flyers depending on how many teams are in your league. Some guys, I know some leagues only go 4 rounds. I'm in quite a few leagues that do 5 rounds. So you start getting really deep in that 5th round of a 12 teamer or a 14 teamer. A guy I got my eye on, and I just find myself taking him everywhere, is Cade Stover. So he was the guy I liked at Ohio State. I was down on him before the draft because I was just like, I don't know how he fits on an NFL team. And then when he went to Houston, I was sold because they were like, basically CJ Stroud was like, get me Cade Stover. He loved Stover at Ohio State. He was kind of, even with all those great wide receivers they've had, he was just a guy that he found on big plays over the middle. And him now being in Houston just jumped him up my board big time, where he was a guy I probably wasn't going to draft at all. And now I'm taking him in the 4th, depending on who's there, but definitely in the 5th round. If he gets me in the 5th, I'm grabbing him up everywhere. You have any thoughts on Cade Stover? I know he's behind Schultz, and I know it takes a couple years for these guys to hit at tight end, but this is my favorite spot to take a long shot. A dart throw is tight ends at the end of these rookie drafts.
Yeah, I mean, they just re-signed Schultz. Like, the contract is what makes me kind of like turn my nose a little bit. But no, I mean, I get it. Certainly, Stover's production. I would call this a very weak tight end class behind Bowers. So you're gonna have a hard time talking me into getting excited about any of them. But yeah, I certainly get the narrative that he is like Stroud's guy. And that's cool. But yeah, I think I maybe have the opposite philosophy where I shy away from the tight ends kind of later, because those really do most often in my experience end up as, oh, it's time to empty out my taxi squad for the next rookies. That is just always kind of the vibe there. Whereas with a running back, it takes 1 or 2 injuries to where, oh, this player has, even if he doesn't have projectable volume at any point after this week, this is at least, maybe I can make a move here. Maybe I can plug him into my starting lineup. Like that happens like in a few week spurts for running backs all the time. That just isn't really the case with these like day 3 tight ends. So yeah, I'm not super into Stover, but I get it.
Yeah, the other guy that I've kind of got an eye on, he's a guy I really liked at college at Marshall. He got hurt at the Senior Bowl. I think it pushed him down a little bit draft boards just because he didn't get a chance to compete at the Combine. I think he would have showed out pretty well at the Combine. And that's Rasheen Ali. He ended up going to the Ravens. He's a late pick, and we always know taking a late pick running backs is very, very questionable. But I just think he's way more talented than Justice Hill. And I think Keaton Mitchell is always going to be kind of that big play guy. They're never really going to be able to count on him all the time. I think there's a path to Ali being the backup to Derrick Henry. Obviously, Derrick Henry's the man there. I want Henry. I don't think Ali is any more than a handcuff at best. But at this point, for me, if I'm taking him late 4th round, somewhere in the 5th round in my rookie drafts, I love the idea of getting a guy that could end up being the backup there. And then maybe in a year or two, if Derrick Henry moves on or is done, there's a shot he moves in there. I know it's a long shot, but I like Ali. Do you got any thoughts on Ali?
No, I mean, he fits perfectly into that archetype I was just talking about of, this is a running back where if Derrick Henry tweaks a hamstring and suddenly Rasheen Ali has projectable starting level volume for a couple of weeks, he's a perfect example of that. And yeah, that is more the type of shot I tend to take late in rookie drafts.
We got ourselves a question here on a trade before we finish up the show. Pull this one up here from Cody Anderson. Thanks for reaching out. 10-team dynasty. Should I trade Purdy and T. Higgins and a 25 first for Stroud? It's a super flex league. Purdy, T. Higgins, and 25 first for Stroud. I know Stroud's cost is an all-time high right now. People are loving him. He was my QB1 going into last year's draft. Ryan, what do you think here? Would you make this deal, or is that a little too much for Stroud in your mind?
So no, I think I'm taking the Stroud side here, honestly. In 10-team leagues, kind of an underrated aspect of this is that the replacement level at quarterback certainly feels a lot higher than it is in like a 12-team league. So with that, it makes the elite guys like a CJ Stroud much more valuable than they are even in 12-team Superflex. So yeah, I'm cool with that just leaning into the elite talent there with Stroud. So yeah, I would take the Stroud side of this.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I'm in a few 10-team leagues or a couple home leagues, and I'm always I lean on the side of go get your guy. If you like a guy, go get him. If you got to slightly overpay, I'm okay with it because I'm like, I'd rather have my guy, especially in a league that's going to be, have a little more options out there because it's only 10-team. So I have no problem doing that because, again, I said Stroud was my number one QB going into the draft last year. I absolutely loved him. He hit with Houston more than I thought he could. I mean, he really played well. And I think that team's got a really high upside. I love what they've done with the wide receivers and the offense they put around him. So I have no problem making that move. I think Purdy's underrated, but if you really like Stroud, I don't have a problem making that move there, Cody. So thanks to you for the question. We appreciate it. We are coming up on the hour mark, so we are going to get out of here in just a few. So, Ryan, go ahead and tell everybody real quick where they can find you, all the things you're doing over there at Fantasy Points.
Yeah, you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at RyanJ_Heath. And then, yes, all of my written work is on fantasypoints.com. Right now, I'm writing this series called Statistically Significant, where I kind of deep dive into all of these different stats in the Fantasy Points data suite and talk about what the stats mean, how predictive they are from season to season, and really just kind of trying to think differently about data and how we can use it in fantasy football and how you can leverage that information to improve all of your fantasy teams is the goal of it at the end. I should also say, since I mentioned it, the Fantasy Points data suite, in my opinion, is the absolute best football data product on the market right now. You can go check it out at data.fantasypoints.com. We have a handful of the tables in there for free so that you can really get a feel for what it is. You can filter by absolutely anything in the data suite, like anything you can think of. I only want to look at stats on catchable targets. You can do that. We have all these hand charted stats, first read target share, lots of cool stuff that's hard to find in other places. So highly recommend checking out the Fantasy Points data suite. Again, that's data.fantasypoints.com. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, John McGlynn. It's a great show, guys. Appreciate you checking us out, John, my buddy over there. For all my content, make sure you check me out. I've got a bunch of stuff out there right now on Dynasty League Football site. We've got all kinds of stuff. I've written a few stories about all the running backs in this rookie draft, values, where I'm taking them, who I like, who I don't like. So go ahead and if you're a member, jump on over there, Dynasty League Football, and just check that out. Also, a bunch of rookie articles on there as well that I've come out with rookie profiles, things like that. And then a bunch of IDP stuff upcoming for anybody that's big into IDP. A lot of breakdowns on every division, every position for IDP for each team. So a lot of that coming up. So make sure you check that out, as well as my IDP rankings. You can find me on the X at JT Orange. We want to thank our guys, our hosts, Fantasy and Frames, for having us. There's the new home of the Stew with JT Brew. So if you checked us out in the past, make sure you jump on, subscribe to Fantasy and Frames, follow them. All kinds of good content there, multiple shows throughout the week. I'm also on the Shoot the Gap IDP show with Jorge, our special guest, SC Romero, tomorrow night. So make sure to check that out. We're going to be talking about IDP rookies and the guys we like in these IDP drafts, where we're taking them, who we think has the best upside to play here in year one as a rookie. Again, I want to thank Ryan for coming on here tonight with me. All kinds of good information. Make sure you go check him out at RyanJ_Heath on the X. That's going to do us for us here tonight on the Stew with JT Brew. May all your draft picks hit and the trade never quit. We'll check you guys next time.